Welcome, YouTubers, to a story about the future. Einstein theorized and hypothesized about loops in time that you could find within a person's mind. Turns out, he wasn't far off from the truth, or at least in his definitions of how time travel or being able to view the future would be possible. In my own research, I'm going to postulate a happenstance, a story, if you will, about the future. So, come with me now, and we'll examine a possible way to get to the future. Now, when we talk about the future, how could you possibly get to the future? Are you going to use a time machine in your own squishy little body? Are you think you can handle the radiation to get from here to there? You may find it very difficult. My vast knowledge of particle physics, radiation, cellular technologies, all these different things, I'm probably going to tell you you're not going to want to do it in your current state. However, there is a way to get to the future. Hundreds of years, 1,000 years into the future, if you want to go. I mean, we're all going to die anyways someday, right? I mean, I'm squishy too. You're squishy, we're all squishy. So what we have to do is prepare for that journey. Now, the Egyptians, they weren't far off with what they were thinking of either. They were like, if I want to get to the future, I've got to prepare. So if you wanted to get to the future, you're going to have to prepare. So let's theorize for a moment on how you would do that. But why would you want to do that? How would you keep yourself safe from the changes in the economy, from the changes in the geopolitical? How would you change? How would you protect yourself from those changes? How would you modify your what vessel could you go in? Well, you are going to have to take everything that is this there. Otherwise, you won't be you. So when Einstein was talking about visiting the future or to get to the future or casual loops in time when dealing with, say, massively parallel biochemical systems, good. In your mind, you should be able to accomplish some of these goals. But in the reality of where you are, in the physical world, it's going to be kind of difficult to get there. So, let's talk about a few ways to get to the future. Now, what are we going to find in the future? Are we going to find a metropolis, a beautiful city that knows no end to its splendor? Is it going to be like Tron? Are we going to be there with all of these beautiful things? Is this going to happen? Probably not. More likely, this is what's going to happen, because everybody on this planet is vying for everybody else's stuff. When I view the future, unfortunately, we're probably going to see this in the next 300 years. Just a massive devastation of everything that we know. And we're talking like, we got all these nukes laying around. We're about to go smaller on the nuclear power plants. We got all these nukes. We've got all these people vying for power. I am 100% sure this is where we're headed. This is the future. So, how do you get from where we are now in this nice comfortable, look at me, I'm making a video, I'm going to put it on YouTube, it's great, I have electrical power, I have food, I have water, and, well, the only way to get there, unfortunately, this is your time machine. This is the time machine that will allow you to get to the future. You're like, oh, but Zio, that's a coffin. Yeah, it is. Now, this is a kind of an example of one of the ones that I envisioned manufacturing that would allow you to reach the future. So essentially, if you see here, we have this is rock or this is marble on the outside, and the inside has a stainless steel liner. Now, this is kind of like a first, you know, ta-da! This is blah. This is what it is. This is your time machine. And honestly, this is the only way for you to get to the future. We're talking hundreds of years in the future. You're not going to be able to get there with the current biotechnology, the current biosciences. They're all profiteering. They're all trying to just make money and make their short existences that much better. They're going to try to get you there, maybe. They're going to try to convince you, you know, so they can shake your money out of your wallets into their hands. But honestly, this is the best way. The Egyptians have already proven this is the best way. So let's look at what they have shown us. They've shown us that through proper technology. Now this right here, this is a stainless steel tank. And see that hole up there? The best way I figure we can get to the future in this body, you're going to have to preserve the human mind, the human body, in such a manner that in the future, the neuropeptides and everything else and all the materials that you're made of right now in the exact order that they are would be preserved long term. So we're talking like we're going to have to stick you in a double Mylar vacuum extraction bag, and we're going to have to freeze dry you under light vacuum and changing temperatures, and then stick you in something like this where you have a completely metal sealed, this is a sealed stainless steel tank, cocoon to carry you into the future. Now, we're going to have to prepare your physical mind with some treatments, some chemicals, and things like that, so that everything that you are, your consciousness will be able to be mapped with future technologies that will be able to scan externally from the outside of your preserved head, and in the future, say 300 years from now. Let's just jump 300 years into the future and look at what I see as that level of technology to bring you back from the dead. And we have some current technologies that are kind of leading us in that direction. This is a head cage, and we use this for something called a gamma knife, so that they can take out, like, well, if that's the tumor in this representation, but this cage structure right here would screw into the skull, and it would make it so that you could basically lock this into a scanning device in the future. You know, I mean, technically you don't need anything past the neck, so honestly you only need what's up here. Scanning the brain with high resolution. I mean, we're talking down to, you're going to have to scan down to the molecular resonance layers using electron scanning technology, like electron gun. I mean, X-ray, perhaps X-ray to be able to penetrate and not damage the tissue, but we're talking like ultra high frequency, broad spectrum. You're pretty much going to have to physically map the human mind, front to back, top to bottom, side to side, and map where all this stuff is, and then have software that can emulate what pathways those would normally be activated. And I mean, we've got squid technology right now, subquantum interference detection devices, and magnetic hats and stuff that they're just barely starting to scratch the surface on where this is going, where this is headed, how do we scan an active human mind. In the future, I'll give you an example of the future. Let's go on. We've got this right here is a restraint device. It's very similar to the other one with the cage, but this is a netting. This is one out of China, and you can see here that it holds the head in place and allows the person to breathe. Well, this similar restraint system, admittedly it's not screwed into the skull, so you couldn't just take the head and plug it into a machine, but I see this as a possible option for a backplane board that could be part of the Mylar vacuum dried human post-mortem storage and future transfer system. So you see here's one in Russia where they use a full cage. You can see where they've screwed it into the skull right here, and you know, he doesn't look too happy because he's still alive. He's still, you know, This is to keep him alive. They're gonna use a gamma scalpel, and they're gonna go in there and they're gonna take a bunch of low power beams and zap stuff that's in his head, tumors and whatnot. But this type of device or cage structure, technically, see how it's a big plastic bubble and you got the cage? That's almost exactly what you need. If you could just save the skull and just correctly freeze dry the skull so that the brain is preserved, maybe with some chemicals, some salts. You really want it to just basically remain exactly the way it is. Einstein's brain, it's currently on display. I believe it's preserved in embalming fluid or alcohol. It's one of the fluids that they use to preserve the human mind. Post-mortem, they slice them up. If it's not alcohol, it's probably just that embalming fluid stuff. Anyways, so we know that the human mind can be preserved. We found them in peat bog. So in peat, we've seen them thousands of years old, and it's still pliable. So that's essentially what you need to do, is create a storage system that's going to keep the human mind exactly where it's supposed to be. And do you need to have the cage with it? Well, you need to have it so that it's preserved and protected. So you probably need a cage structure around it that's metal or some type of protected device. Like in this case, we have this looks like polycarbonate, perhaps. Anyways, so moving on. This is another one. Shows you the same type of mesh system where it holds the head in place. And these scans can be done beforehand, but let's take a peek into the future. What this would offer is, you could use your X-ray, high intensity or high frequency X-ray to be able to scan out a human mind post-mortem. It's probably the best way to do that. You could probably do it while they're still alive. In this case, they're doing it while they're still alive. Going into the future, this would be more of a casting. So you'd have a person either before they were deceased or shortly thereafter would be placed into a semi-rigid or a material that could become rigid after being laid over the body, and then of course that would be put inside with the body in the bag, extract the water, freeze dry the human beef jerky. So let's go back to the that right there. No, forward. Next one. Okay, next one. Okay, so like I said, now this is Warsaw, Poland, right after is 1944, I think is what it says, and you can see, man, it almost looks like static. It's completely destroyed. This is what I envision the future. Honestly, it's going to be a nasty, nasty, nasty war, and it's going to be over resources. It's going to be, we talk about resources, where we are right now on the planet for available resources, things that countries fight over. For example, lithium, copper, all these things that are being used by technology to increase our robotics and computer systems. These will be fought over. These are being fought over. This is what's going to lead us to these things right here. Shortages in food, shortages in resources, economic upheaval, but primarily anger. Humans are deceptive creatures that tend to lie and steal and get angry and fight and just conquer one another to get what they want. So in this case, we are definitely headed towards like the Bible kind of thing. Pretty much all your religious texts, they state at one point or another there was upheavals that led to battles that destroyed entire civilizations, and we can see records of this. So we know it is in human nature to lead to the inevitability of complete destruction. But let's look at why. So this is a picture of a diamond mine. Probably you might have seen it before, but this is the kind of thing that we're going to see in the future as our industrial appetite increases. As we begin reaching for the stars, we will deplete concentrated resources. Copper, the largest copper mines in the world are currently running out. The good ore is running out. Now there's other surface mines, but the big ones, the ones that have provided industry with readily available copper are running out. Now this is a diamond mine, like I said, but diamond is one of those things. It's just like any resource. So we want to look at what Earth is going to look like 200 years from now. You're going to have a lot of big holes in the ground. Okay? Are we going to see major battles because of this? Definitely. Definitely. When you have countries that run out of basically everything, well, there is the recycling program, but it's going to come down to war. It's going to come down to war over resources, and where can you be as a human to move into the future? And that's going to be in the coffin. Actually, you're going to have to use the Egyptian method and move into the future. But yeah, that right there, this is why the future ends up in conflict. We only have, look, okay, so this is the natural resource. Look at all this other land. This is basically worthless, and only that spot has the material that is needed. So this type of scenario is going to be repeated over and over and over all over the globe until all you have is a bunch of stinking holes that are filled with totally polluted water. You wouldn't want to mine it anyways because it's not profitable. You talk about profitability, accessibility versus processing. I mean, you reach there's like a balancing point. At some point, every mine becomes unprofitable. You're just digging up the dirt. You're just digging up the rock. There's no more stuff in it. So, in the future, you know, we're going to have some very interesting things I can predict in the future. We will have battles, we will have wars that will be fought over resources on a grander scale, on a much larger scale. I don't believe they will remain small skirmishes. I don't believe that it's going to be minimalistic. It's going to go big, and it's going to go nasty. And it has before. You know, Warsaw in 1944, excellent example. You know, you had countries fighting over resources. Well, the future, the consumption appetite of developing countries is way more than they were back in 1944. Now, admittedly, we have e-commerce, we have trade, we have a totally different global system. But what if something interrupts it? Well, like the coronavirus, for example. The coronavirus is an excellent example of what could happen. What if it was worse than the coronavirus? I mean, yeah, we had we have almost 200,000 people die just in the U.S. from this, at least trackable virus, but there's other things. There's industrial waste, there's pollution, there's CO2. What if we reach a CO2 level on the planet that you have to use scrubbers to survive? Because the air becomes so toxic. Because it basically is no longer breathable. We're at what, 400 ppm right now? It's just going to go up. The scientists have already stated, well, when last time was at 600 ppm, that's when we really have to worry. Okay, so let's fast forward to 600 ppm. What if there's only certain materials, certain elements on the planet that you could build efficient enough CO2 scrubbers to keep the remaining population alive? We're talking bubble cities, we're talking portable air tanks. They've already got, you see the older people that are carrying oxygen concentrators already. It's a little box, rechargeable box they wear on their hip, and they wear these to breathe enhanced oxygen because the oxygen levels are no longer sufficient for them. So oxygen generators, portable oxygen generators become a thing. You know, I mean, I think smoking is probably going to fall out of fashion because, well, it's, you know, smoking uses up oxygen. I think fossil fuels, we're looking at a shift in fossil fuels. I mean, we're tapping the oil shales. Back in 1978, 79, they announced that, well, the scientists, the real scientists at the time that could quantify the world's deposits of oil at that time and say, okay, well, we've already seen these through our probing systems, and we know that when we're within 25 years, we should wait until at least that point. When we're within 25 years of depletion of all the oil reserves, then we'll hit the oil shale. Okay, well, fine. Well, they hit the oil shale recently, so that means we got what? About 20 years of oil left, and if you look at the resources, it's pretty much right there. So at some point you run out of things. So we're talking scarcity. We're not talking wrath of God thing, we're talking scarcity. We're humans and we ate all the chocolate and it's all gone, and now all the cocoa beans are dead, all the bananas are dead, and there's funguses ravaging all these different crops. Honestly, it all comes down to management. Nobody wants to work. Nobody really wants to work. Everybody just wants to, not have to manage properly. When you look at vertical farming is an excellent way to increase productivity from an area when you're talking about growing crops. But let's look at crops. If you use the same land to harvest crops up, what eventually happens to that land? Well, all your minerals, your trace minerals are depleted because the plants suck them up. Well, then you chop down the plants, you ship them out. Well, what if our food becomes so depleted in all of these, not rare elements, look at iron, becomes depleted, becomes so low in iron that suddenly everybody's anemic? Well, that's currently happening right now. You can feed plants plant food, your nitrogen salts and things like that, and they'll grow and they'll look green, but they'll contain less of those trace elements, and unless you're supplementing, you're not going to get them. And there's vitamin D shortages because we're all living indoors now. We don't go outside in the sun. Even I'm indoors right now because I have to make this video. But this is the future: depletion. So when you talk about traveling to the future, hundreds of years from past, we need to get past this and into the utopian society that we read about in sci-fi, so that we can enjoy the future. I don't see any way right now to get to the future in the limited time you have. You have limited time on this planet. It's gone. It's so gone. 10 years, the older you get, the time just goes by faster and faster and faster, and pretty soon, well, you don't care about those dreams you had when you were younger, so you just don't do them. And a lot of people are like that. I think that's why a lot of the scientists are stuck in their way. They just want to pay the bills. They just want to finish that one project they've been working on for 20 years. They don't want to start anything new. So, but yeah, that's the future, and unfortunately, this is definitely going to happen. Now, this hole is about 100 years old, 1889 to now, so 1890. It's about 110 something years old. I think I started this back in the 1800s, and now it's depleted. There's other resources, but pretty soon we're going to have holes like this all over the planet, and they're going to be man-made holes. Look at aluminum. Any of your metals that are super useful for industry, aluminum, gonna run out of it. Steels, there's going to be eventually a point at which steel, where you're going to have society reaching into the ruins of a completely destroyed city and fishing out all that metal and literally becoming a scavenger society. Once the commerce and industry and the other things have been destroyed, that's what you're going to have. You're going to have this scavenger society that's going to be scavenging these destroyed cities for resources. And you see that now, even in modern times, but you're definitely going to see it in the future.